It was like walking into somebody's backyard on the 4th of July. So how does a chain that close to the top just disappear? How do you get erased so completely that 40 years later, when the name turns up on a hit television show, most of the country assumes the writers made it up? Today we're going back to Burger Chef. Let's get into it. It starts with a machine shop, which is not where anybody expects a hamburger story to start. A man named Frank Thomas opened General Equipment Company in Indianapolis in 1930, and for 20 years it was exactly what it sounds like, a shop full of men building frozen custard machines for other people's restaurants. Thomas retired in 1951 and handed the whole operation over to his two sons, Frank Jr. and Donald, and to their brother-in-law, Robert Wildman. 3 years later, the phone rang. Two men down in Jacksonville, Florida had a hamburger stand they were trying to get off the ground, and they had a problem they couldn't solve. Griddles were too slow, and slow was going to kill them. What they wanted was a machine that could run a lot of patties over open gas flame, fast on some kind of conveyor belt. And they'd been told the men in Indianapolis could build anything. They could. They did. And the thing those brothers came up with could push somewhere around 2,000 burgers an hour. The two men in Jacksonville were James McLemore and David Edgerton, and the little stand they were building down there was Burger King. I want you to hold on to that, because everything that happens over the next 40 years is sitting right there in it. Burger Chef's very first act, before there was a Burger Chef at all, was to build the best thing in the business and hand it to somebody else. They finished that machine, they shipped it, and then they stood around in the shop doing the math on what somebody else was about to make with it. And they came to the obvious conclusion. Why keep selling the equipment when you could go open the restaurants? In the spring of 1957, they put up a little demonstration stand on the north side of Indianapolis, right across the road from the brand new Glendale shopping center, and the whole point of it was to show the broiler off to people who might buy one. A newspaper ad that March called it the city's first Florida-style self-service drive-in. People kept showing up, not to buy machines, to buy hamburgers. So the following year, they quit pretending it was a showroom, opened a proper standalone restaurant over on West 16th Street, and put a name up on the sign. Burger Chef. There's a story that they picked it to sound like a slightly fancier version of Burger King, and whether or not that's true, it tells you exactly how those brothers were thinking. They weren't building an alternative to anybody. They were coming for the throne. Here's what it cost you in 1958. 15 cents for a hamburger, 15 for the fries, 15 for a milkshake. Then somebody had the idea to bundle all three together and give the bundle a name, and they called it the Triple Treat, and the whole thing came to 45 cents. So if you've ever wondered where the combo meal came from, where the number one with a Coke came from, it came from two guys in Indiana who built custard machines. 1958. And nobody has paid them a nickel for it since. Now let me put you inside one of these, because that's the part nobody puts on a website. It's a Friday evening in about 1971. Your dad pulls the station wagon into a lot off the highway, and the sign out front is that particular orange and brown that only existed between about 1968 and 1982, lit up against a sky that's just starting to go dark. You can smell it from the car. Not grease. Smoke, char, actual fire hitting actual beef, because the broiler is running flat out and the fat is dripping and coming back up through the flames. You go in and there's noise, kids, trays sliding, somebody's little brother crying about something. Your burger comes out plain. Nothing on it. And that's not a mistake, that's the entire idea. Because now you carry it over to an open counter along the wall and you build it yourself. Lettuce, tomato, pickles, onion, relish, ketchup, mustard, as much as your arm can reach and nobody standing there counting. They called it the Works Bar. And there are grown adults out there who will still argue with you about the right order to put it on in. That's Tuesday night too in a lot of towns, because Tuesday was family fun night, which meant somebody on the staff had been talked into a pirate costume or a gorilla suit and was out by the road waving at traffic while the cars went by honking. And it's Saturday morning because the cartoons ran constantly between everything else and you knew the characters before you could read. That's the thing McDonald's never had. Not the food, the feeling. Burger Chef felt like it belonged to your town instead of to a corporation in Illinois. Which is what makes the rest of this hurt. Start with the sandwich, because that's the one that still starts arguments at family dinners. The Big Chef, spelled with an S, went on the menu around 1964. 2 beef patties, cheese, shredded lettuce, a bun cut into 3 pieces so there was a layer of bread sitting in the middle of it, and a sauce that people have been trying to reverse engineer for 50 years now. Former employees say the base was Miracle Whip, with dill relish, minced onion, and a little Tabasco in it. McDonald's put the Big Mac on its national menu in 1968. And I want to be fair here, because neither of them actually invented the double-decker. That goes back to Bob Whelan and the Big Boy in the 1930s. But of the 2 chains that people actually argue about, Burger Chef got there 3 or 4 years earlier, and it isn't close. Same story with the fish. Back in 1964, one of the franchise owners started selling a fish sandwich for $0.25, and the company eventually rolled it out everywhere as something called the Skipper's Treat. McDonald's took the Filet-O-Fish national the following year. And then came the Fun Meal, which is the one they should be remembered for. It started in 1972 with the Fun Burger, a kid-sized hamburger in a wrapper covered in puzzles with a small toy dropped in the bag. It sold. So the year after that, they built the whole thing out properly, and they gave it a cast. Burger Chef himself and his sidekick Jeff. A magician called Burgerini. A vampire named Count Fangburger, a witch called Cackleburger. Every panel of that box had a game or a riddle or one of those characters printed on it, and there are people watching this right now who could still draw the thing from memory. So by 1972, this one company had the combo meal, the double-decker with the special sauce, the fish sandwich, the toppings bar, a kid's meal in a printed box, and a broiler no competitor on earth could match. And not one single piece of it was protected. No serious patent play, no aggressive trademark work, nothing built to stop a bigger company from walking in and helping itself. Meanwhile, the chain itself was going off like a rocket. 8 restaurants at the end of 1958, 100 by 1962. By December of 1967, the Wall Street Journal had them at 600 locations across 39 states, which made Burger Chef the second biggest hamburger chain in America, ahead of everybody on earth except one. And in August of 1969, they cut the ribbon on restaurant number 1000 down in Florida. The engine under all that was franchising, and in the early 60s, a Burger Chef franchise was one of the most wanted pieces of paper in the country. You put up somewhere around $129,000 to get in, and according to the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis, the average owner was reportedly seeing about 50% a year back on that money. 50%. Every year. And they didn't just hand you a set of keys and wish you luck. Either new owners came to Indianapolis for 3 weeks of training, run in partnership with the college that's now the University of Indianapolis, and you learned every piece of it. How to refill the ketchup dispensers. How to interview a 17-year-old for a counter job. How to keep the books straight. One of those owners was a man named Bill Mitchell, and I want you to remember his name because we come back to him at the worst possible moment in this story. The advertising was the other half of the rocket, and if you were a kid in that era, it was completely unavoidable. Those cartoons ran between everything, and the voice coming out of Burger Chef himself belonged to a man named Paul Winchell. And if that name doesn't land right away, he was the voice of Tigger. The bouncing, the growl, all of it. Same man selling you a hamburger between cartoons on a Saturday morning. They gave away Star Wars posters with Coca-Cola in 1977 and a set of endangered species drinking glasses for the World Wildlife Fund the year after. If those glasses were in your mother's cabinet growing up, a full set goes for about $20 today, which I suspect will disappoint a few of you. Eve Plum, who America knew as Jan Brady, did the Big Chef commercials. And all of it was cheap. Middle of the 70s, a super chef ran you 89 cents. A Big Chef was 79. A cheeseburger was a quarter and a plain hamburger was 20 cents. Which brings us to the top of the mountain. Around 1972, Burger Chef had roughly 1,100 restaurants. That's the high water mark. And think about what it actually represents. A chain that started as a demonstration stand for a piece of equipment 15 years earlier, sitting 100 restaurants behind McDonald's, with a better sandwich, a better broiler, a kid's meal 6 years ahead of the competition, and a toppings bar nobody else would dare copy for another decade. 100 restaurants. That was the gap. Now here's where it comes apart. In 1979, McDonald's launched the Happy Meal across the country. A hamburger, fries, a drink, and a toy, all of it inside a printed cardboard box with games down the side. 6 years after the fun meal. And look, I know exactly how that sounds coming from a channel like this one. Every dead brand has people who will swear the big guy stole from them. So let's not take Burger Chef's word for it. Let's go get it from the other side. In 2019, a retired senior executive from McDonald's sat down with the Chicago Tribune and said it in plain English. The idea for the Happy Meal came from their competitor, Burger Chef. Their regional advertising manager down in St. Louis had seen what Burger Chef was doing for the kids, thought it was a good idea, and carried it up to a man in Kansas City who built the thing out. That's McDonald's. On the record. 40 years later, Burger Chef sued over it, and Burger Chef lost. Nothing had been protected, so nothing was defensible, and the best idea that company ever had walked straight across the street and put on a red wig. And it didn't just cost them a lawsuit. The Happy Meal wasn't really selling hamburgers, it was raising a generation of children who grew up believing McDonald's was the place the toy came from, and once you've lost a whole generation of kids, you don't get them back. Burger Chef had that first. In 1973. And they let it go. If you're enjoying this trip back, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Because there's a whole graveyard of these places and we're working through it one at a time. And the reason they were that helpless was already 11 years old, because in 1968, right in the middle of the climb, General Foods had bought Burger Chef for $16.5 million. General Foods made Jell-O, they made Maxwell House coffee, they made Tang, the stuff they gave the astronauts. What they had never done, not one single time in their history, was run a restaurant, and they were about to learn that selling a box of pudding and running a kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Friday night are not remotely the same job. And this next part I'm not pulling from a blog or a fan page. It comes straight out of a federal appeals court opinion decided in 1986, and the court laid the whole thing out in flat, unsentimental language. 3 years after the purchase in 1971, General Foods wrote down $80 million on Burger Chef. 460 restaurants closed. 908 were left standing. And General Foods went out looking for somebody, anybody, to take the entire thing off their hands. They could not find one buyer. Quick note on that number, because you'll see it written a dozen different ways online. The figure people repeat is 83 million. The court record says 80. Go with the court. So now they're stuck with it. And General Foods made a decision, and the phrase they used for it internally is the coldest thing in this whole story. They decided they would manage the loss, which means exactly what it sounds like it means. They stopped guaranteeing the leases for their franchise owners. They stopped putting real money into the buildings. They pulled back off the coasts, retreated into the Midwest where the name still meant something to people, and they waited it out. Now imagine what that feels like from behind the counter. You're the owner. You signed on with the #2 chain in America, you read the brochures promising growth and the full backing of a major corporation, you put your savings in and your name on the door. And now the paint is going. The broiler is 15 years old and parts are getting harder to find every year. There's a brand new McDonald's across the street with a playground out front and a clown on television every afternoon, and head office in Indianapolis isn't returning your calls. That was the Vaughn family's argument in court. A family out of St. Louis who put everything they had into a restaurant and said General Foods had been planning its exit the whole time it kept selling franchises. A jury agreed with them. The appeals court threw it out. And remember Bill Mitchell. Mitchell spent over $117,000 of his own money remodeling his restaurant right at the very end of all this, and then found out he wasn't allowed to convert it into a Hardee's because there was already a Hardee's sitting too close by. He settled with them for $100,000. And then he kept the Burger Chef sign up out front anyway, until the day he retired. Which tells you something about what these places meant to the people who ran them. By 1978, Burger Chef had slipped to 4th in the country. And then came the night that a lot of you watching are going to remember, because it was on the news for weeks. Friday, November 17th, 1978. 4 employees were closing the Burger Chef out on Crawfordsville Road in Speedway, Indiana. Jane Freet was 20 years old, and she was the assistant manager. Ruth Ellen Shelton was 17, an honors student. Danny Davis was 16. Mark Flemons was 16. $581 came out of the registers. All 4 of them were taken from the restaurant that night, and 2 days later their bodies were found in a wooded area down in Johnson County, about 20 miles away. And the part that still sits badly, almost 50 years on, is what happened the next morning. Police looked at an open back door and an empty till and assumed the 4 teenagers had taken the money and gone off somewhere to party. So the restaurant got cleaned. And it opened for business the next day. Whatever was left inside that building went into a mop bucket before anybody knew there had been a murder at all. The case has never been solved. A man named Donald Forrester confessed from a prison cell in 1984, walked detectives out to the exact spot in those woods, knew details that had never been released to a soul, and then took the whole thing back 2 years later. He died in prison in 2006. The restaurant itself was finally torn down in 2024. Those 4 families have been waiting for an answer since 1978. Burger Chef was already dying that night. But it is hard to overstate what those murders did to a name that was already limping in the exact part of the country where it had any strength left at all. In December of 1981, General Foods finally found their buyer. A Canadian company called Imasco, which owned Hardee's, paid $43.5 million for the whole chain. 13 years, and they got out for a fraction of what they'd put in. And here's how it actually ended for most people, which is quieter than you'd think. You didn't get an announcement. There was no farewell. One week you drove past on your way home and it was there the way it had always been, and a few weeks later the sign was different. And the broiler was gone, and the works bar had been ripped out and replaced with a counter. Same building. Same parking lot. Same booth you'd sat in since you were 6. And it just wasn't yours anymore. For the people who worked there, it was worse than that. A lot of these were somebody's first job. 15, 16 years old, learning how to show up on time and take an order and mop a floor at midnight. They didn't lose a job so much as watch the thing get renamed around them while they were still standing in it. And the towns felt it too. In a lot of small places, that restaurant was the only spot open past 9. The place the team went after the game, where you took a date when you were 17 and had $9. When it went, something in the shape of the evening went with it. Franchise owners who happened to sit too close to an existing Hardee's weren't allowed to convert at all, so a handful of them just kept running under the Burger Chef name until their agreements ran out on their own. Which is why the last Burger Chef in America was still open, still serving, out in Cookeville, Tennessee, in 1996. 14 years after the chain was sold off. It changed its name that year, and that was the end of it. Except it isn't. Quite, because you can still eat this food. There are 3 former Burger Chef restaurants open right now, today. Still running that menu under different names. One is in South Charleston, West Virginia. One is in Reidsville, North Carolina, a place called Pete's. And Pete's still has the original Works bar sitting there in the corner of the dining room. They'll sell you a big burger and a super burger, which are exactly what you think they are with the names filed off for legal reasons. And the third one is in Cleveland, Tennessee, and that one has never closed. Not for a remodel, not for an ownership change, not for a single day since it opened. There's a place up in Danville, Illinois called The Chef that's still running a flame broiler, and Hardee's, who owns the trademark to this day, has brought the Big Chef back 3 separate times, in 2001, 2007, and 2014. It's sold out every time, because there are still hundreds of thousands of people out there who take one bite of that sauce and are 11 years old again, standing at a toppings bar deciding how many pickles is too many pickles. Then in 2014, Mad Men built its final season around an advertising agency chasing one account, and the account was Burger Chef. Peggy Olson's career-defining pitch, the one people still write essays about, is a Burger Chef pitch. Millions